Hello and welcome to Dreamloop DevCast. This time we're talking about remakes and remasters. So, welcome guys.
Hello.
And thank you for having me again.
Very official.
Yes.
Very official, as is our style. So, tons of remakes are happening at this moment and will be happening throughout this year. And to start this thing off, I would like to tell you right off the bat about one remake that is pretty big for me personally. Namely, Secret of Mana remake was released last Thursday on Steam, PS4 and PS Vita. And this was one of my personal honorary mentions in our most anticipated games of 2018 list. And being a Mana fan from the Super Nintendo days, I watched some of the early review headlines in slight terror, so to speak. People are saying that it made a great game worse, and I'm seeing things like 3 out of 5, 6 out of 10, kind of mediocre. So I bought it, and I've played it only for a couple of hours now, but so far it's not that bad. It certainly doesn't have that blow me away kind of factor, but it isn't horrible at all. Like the main character, for example, they look really, really good. The fighting feels fun, and it's also faithful to the original. In fact, the whole game seems to be the exact same as the original. Like the world is built square for square the same. And I actually prefer that. I think that's nice. And then they restored some of the dialogue that was supposed to be in the original, so that's nice as well. And well, speaking of dialogue, there is now voice acting, but that's where the bad kind of begins. And I think the Japanese voices are all right, but there are no mouth animations, and that feels pretty jarring, especially with the new camera close-ups, etc. It's a bit of a letdown, really. It feels like a quality gap. And
What's going on there?
I think Kimmo is trying to open a beer. It's like super noisy in the office. I also notice my mic is all the time like picking something up.
Yeah.
That's fine. Kimmo, we are allowing you that beer.
Thank you. Just this time.
No, every time, of course.
But talking about Secret of Mana remake, like what I heard about it is most of the critics seem to be exactly that. It is the same game, and maybe that is not good enough, so to speak. Like I saw a bunch of discussion on Reddit, at least, where people were saying that, the remake just proves that it doesn't stand the test of time and such, and especially because they changed the style to 3D, so some of that charm is gone now. So even people who maybe could now go back and play the original cannot play the remake because it doesn't have the same nostalgia, it doesn't have the same charm, and the gameplay systems don't hold up. I'm not sure if that's true or not. I haven't played the remake, I haven't really played the original, but it's something I heard about it.
Yeah, I haven't read any of the reviews myself because I want to get a fresh opinion, as fresh as it can be from an actual fan of the original. But I agree that the 3D style doesn't feel as charming as the 2D one. But when it comes to the actual optimizations and changes in for example, the menu systems, they were pretty clunky in the old one too. And the improvements are pretty oddly specific, I would say. For example, they reworked some inventory menus, which is good, but they didn't change the very, very clunky shopkeeper dialogue systems. Well, I'm not going to go in deep to that, but it seems that they somehow restricted the improvements into some really specific things, and it doesn't always seem to make sense why they wouldn't upgrade something.
I mean, I think it's just because it's sort of balancing act, because it's a classic game and it's a remaster. It's not a completely new game or a reboot or whatever. So they have to kind of, I guess, make calls like what makes the original, as good as it was, stuff like that. So
I also noticed that they removed some little cutscenes. For example, like the party flying through the air with the cannon travel system. It's a fast travel system. Yeah, you know that one. They get shot out of a cannon, and I wonder why did they remove that? Because in the original game, there was a moment where they show off new graphics technology, like Super Nintendo's Mode 7 fake
It's
3D.
quite iconic because I'm not that familiar with the game, but I remember that part.
Yeah, it was a cool looking gimmick in the old game, and since a new remake always has like new technology available, why wouldn't they do the same? I was kind of looking forward to seeing it.
Maybe it's just that they didn't want to. It would be a lot of work to model the world map to work with that. Like maybe they would have needed to, so they figured like just cut it so that we don't have to do as much.
Yeah.
I think that's really the thing you mentioned previously too, that they don't, for example, animate the mouths. Like I think that's the charm thing, so to speak. Like back in the day, they were more limited technologically, but they put a lot of effort and love into these games. And now they, they put it in 3D, but for example, they don't animate the mouths or they don't add that specific scene, stuff like that. They're kind of cutting corners.
Yeah. Then there's also the pretty big matter of the soundtrack, which is arranged by two guys under the supervision of the original composer Hiroki Kikuta. And even though I checked out the two arrangers, I'll have to check their names again soon here. But they're like pretty established guys. But still, I think that so far what I've heard from the new soundtrack, it's kind of subpar in my opinion. There's some really weird production choices, especially in the few very first tracks that you hear, which are pretty important in my opinion. Like they have some like pretty obnoxious lead sounds and drum sounds, and then some unintentional stuff like guitars being out of tune and sloppy tracking and stuff like that. So I'm glad the original OST is included and that you can switch to it anytime. But of course, I would like the new one to be awesome too.
It a little bit sounds like that maybe they had some budget constraints in general.
Yeah. Also, some sound effects are pretty buggy. I noticed that there's this enemy, this Buzzbee kind of enemy type, and they have this attack where they lunge at you, and that lunge attack seems to have a sound effect that sounds like a punch connecting with somebody. And they keep repeating it, and it keeps playing this punch sound over and over, and it even plays at the wrong time. You can see clearly that the punch sound comes first, and then you can see the enemy kind of lunging at you. So it's clearly a bug.
That might explain because a bunch of people were complaining on Reddit, for example, when they're complaining that the combat system doesn't feel good and it's unresponsive, stuff like that. I mean, that would be unresponsive if you hear like a punch sound and only then the actual attack happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there might be some like actual kind of bugginess there too.
Yeah, I can totally, though, I can foresee that some people might feel that the mana combat system is unresponsive because it's based on your power meter. When you attack once, you just press a button, and then your power meter goes to 0, and it fills back up to 100% in a couple of seconds. So if you keep mashing the attack, you're going to just keep doing single-digit damage. It's like you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to just hit once and wait for your power meter to go back up.
Yeah, it's kind of like I saw some people complaining that it's obvious in a modern day that they wanted to make a turn-based game, and then they kind of just turned it into an action game by slapping these things on top of that. I'm not sure if it sounds like that to me personally, but and also the funny thing is, for example, Minecraft, funny enough, upgraded their combat system to work like that now. Or well, they did it a while back, but it's essentially exactly like that, where you have to, control how often you attack. If you keep spamming, then you will not really deal any damage. So it's still to this day a thing that is used, a system that is used to prevent spamming in a I would say like simplified combat systems or whatever. Ones where you only have one attack button. So to me, it doesn't sound that bad.
Yeah, I heard that or read that one big thing about the combat system was that now they allow like 360 degrees rotation on all characters instead of the 4 directions or 8 directions that it used to be. Have you noticed any difference in that regard? Some people are very critical about that.
Yeah, I can kind of understand people being critical. It definitely helps some corner situations, especially with the ranged attacks like bow and arrows and the boomerang and stuff like that. Anything with a little bit more range, it starts to really give you an advantage. But that's another thing that I personally find annoying, or well, in any way disappointing. So that's something I kind of like.
Going back to a thing that you mentioned earlier, was that you said that you can change the soundtrack to the original OST at will anytime. That brought to mind that some people were really disappointed with the graphics of the Shadow of Colossus remake, because the original one had this aesthetic that was, I guess, it had a lot of fog everywhere. And at least back then, I'm not sure if it was confirmed, but it was theorized that it was due to PlayStation 2 lacking power to render everything, which would make sense, and that same trick was used in Silent Hill before. But now with the remake and the power of the PS4 and Pro, there was no need for that fog anymore, so it was taken off. And some people were really disappointed because it really changes the look of the game. And
that's a weird thing, like, because back in the day that fog was often used to like hide drawing distance issues basically, but it can also be an aesthetic choice.
And it's often both.
Yeah, there was an additional point where I was gonna say that with the remasters and visuals, I liked what they did with the Halo, I think 1 and 2 remakes that they did a while back, where you could change back to the old graphics at will anytime in the game. And I think that was something that many people were expecting from the Shadow of Colossus remake as well.
For example, the LucasArts adventure game remasters also do this, where you can swap between new style and old style with the press of a button. But I think the problem with that is that, for example, like, that would work, but maybe if people are happy with everything else in the remake, but they change the aesthetic by removing the fog, then maybe the fog itself should be a toggleable thing. That tends to be like this kind of like engineer type of a thing, where people are like, well, we had that there because, of technical limitations, so now we don't have those, so let's remove it. But that's not quite how it works. It can also serve an aesthetic purpose. I mean, there is fog in real life. It's an actual thing.
No, it was God tries to hide the draw distances.
Maybe it's that,
It's rendering really slowly at times, so it has to have some
really
fog.
bad pop-in,
Yeah.
I totally agree that the fog and the draw distance, especially in PS2 era games, it can definitely give that distinct feeling when you're playing, and I think that's a place for a producer or the creator of the game when they're making a remake. That's a place for the producer to kind of make a big decision whether they want to keep the fog, because if he determines that it's a very important part of how playing the game feels emotionally. And
it's not even that, it's that the art is not made, like, the world is not designed to be viewed at a distance, like
that's one part of it, I think.
Because I remember, for example, back in the day when I was playing Morrowind on the PC, and I think I beat it, and then a bit later I started modding it, and there were mods too, because that was a bunch of time after the actual game had come out, so there were a bunch of mods where you can like change the draw distance, stuff like that, and I like removed the fog, and I could see like really far, and it looks like ours, because of course you start getting like, even if there is detail, it becomes this pixelated mess at the distance, and you don't have like proper anisotropic filtering, stuff like that, and in general it reveals how small the world is, because it is really small if you don't have the fog. But like, I was completely happy with the fog, and I just figured, well, Morrowind is a foggy place, that's completely fine. So sometimes, like, and that really got me thinking, like, because people were like, oh, this is amazing, I'm gonna remove the fog. Why would you remove it? What do you get from it? You get to look at pixelated mess of LOD models at a distance that were not supposed to be viewed from far away.
And even if they had a chance to make the distance details look really good. Who says that it's a better idea than to have fog in a certain area?
I think many times fog just adds atmosphere, like a ton of atmosphere. And there was I have a theory about the Shadow of Colossus, why the fog isn't there, and I'm pretty sure that many people have the same theory as well. Is that they had it there? It was some like maybe volumetric fog or whatever, something that hits performance, and when they started or got to the end of the development and started or finalized the game with all the performance tweaks and everything, they sort of took it off, and that was like that's the reason why it's not there. That's at least what I came up with. I guess the other reason would be that the engineering sort of way of thinking that Ville just said previously.
Because the thing is, like, fog is not really, these days, it's not really a thing, unless you do something super fancy with like light shots and stuff like that. If it's just like basically things at a distance, get a color blended into them, it doesn't really have a performance cost. It saves performance because you can reduce draw distance.
Yeah. But I'm not sure how much these days that sort of a fog is used anyway, because
I mean that's generally how it works. Then you might do some screen space stuff on top of that, but I mean that's essentially what fog is. You might have some fancy calculation stuff like, oh, light has traveled this and this long distance since hitting this surface and it's at this angle and stuff like that. But it's not really that much of an expensive effect if it's distance fog. Of course, it's different if it's like, you know, fog like, for example, like mist on the ground, and you can like go into the mist, or you can come up from it and stuff like that, and that's different. Yeah. But if it's just like omnipresent fog everywhere in the distance, but it's still very much possible that was the case. They were not hitting the performance targets, and they were just like, oh, fuck it, just, you know, let's just keep chopping away. Let's remove all the post-processing effects and see, now it works, or whatever, it's actually shit now, so...
Because what I've heard is that the game has been I mean, the performance is really good in that game. Like, they did a really good job with that. And, well, the studio behind it has the track record of actually being really tenacious with the good performance.
Then you could do the thing that a bunch of console games are doing these days. That would be, I think, perfect there, is like, make it a toggle. Put it like, you know, I want the original foggy atmosphere even if there is FPS drops, or, you know, well, I don't want FPS drops and I want to see really far. Make it an option for people.
Yeah. And then again, we come to the point where if it had the option of going back to the old style of the graphics or the new style, then everything would be fine, I guess.
But of course, the problem, I think, with depending on what old style and new style means in a 3D game, because your render pipeline might be completely different between how it was and how it is now. How lighting is handled, everything is handled. So you would essentially need to have like 2 render pipelines running at the same time, where you can swap between them. Like, it could get a bit of a messy thing. Like, it's not trivial to do. It might be easier to let there be some features that can be toggled on or off. They can do it with the LucasArts games easily, of course, because they're just 2D.
Have you guys played Turok Dinosaur Hunter?
Nope. Not particularly recently.
It's it's a first-person shooter. I think it was originally for Nintendo 64, and that game has a ton of fog. It's really overbearing. In that game, you can definitely feel that it's it was to enable something like engine-wise, and you know. But I still have to say that even though it looks ridiculous, it still does add quite a bit of suspense when you're playing it, because you can hear the dinosaurs coming from
I
mile
always
away.
remember thinking that it's, because I remember my friend had that actually fallen into the 64, and I remember thinking there too that it's kind of like this foggy, you know, misty, like wet place, you know, a swamp with dinosaurs. Like, that's what it looks like. It's just foggy. It doesn't really bother you that much. As long as it's not like the draw distance is like 10 meters away and shit just, you know, spawns on your face and kills you. If it's a little bit farther away, then I think it's completely fine.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that in Turok.
Yeah, because the enemies are really fast and stuff like that,
Yeah.
For some enemies, so.
But on topic of other remakes, System Shock Remake is on a hiatus now. That's a shame. But I read that the dev team thought that they had lost focus and they're taking a break, and they're promising that the project is not cancelled and they are coming back stronger than ever. So
I read that too, and I remember thinking that it must be that because it's such an ambitious game, and it's obviously like not perfectly polished. So it's the perfect example of a game where like maybe it was supposed to be this way, so let's make it this way, and you start having like feature creep, you start adding things, and you start let's fix this little thing that turns into a really big feature. You have to really figure out like what are you doing, what do you want to have here, what do you want to keep, what do you want to change.
Yeah, that's what I heard as well, that it basically boiled down to feature creep, and then they needed to refocus their efforts to actually continue with the project. Yeah, but it's a shame to have these news.
It's really good that they decided it, though, because it would have been a disaster, most likely, if they had continued going on without caring about the fact that they feel a little lost.
Yeah, I mean, then ultimately what will happen is either you just never get it done, or you end up having to cut features anyway, and it's probably basically a buggy mess. So I think this is pretty much the best possible outcome. If they were already at the point where we started having feature creep, is take a break and kind of gather their thoughts and figure out like, okay, what do we actually want to do?
Yeah, of course, being a Kickstarter project, it kind of they kind of had to be open about it, because a lot of people would have been mad if they would just vanished.
But of course, some Kickstarters do that. But I guess that speaks for the devs that they were open about it.
Yep.
I listened to. Go ahead, Tom.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. I'm gonna switch topics, so you go ahead.
Okay. I'll just add quickly that I listened to 2 tracks from this stage of the production that they're in right now with System Shock. One of them was an orchestral piece, and one was like this neurofunk / drum and bass stuff. And the orchestral piece was the theme for Citadel Station, and I have to say that was generic. That was really bad. I did not like it. It sounded like BioShock, which is not in itself a bad thing, but it doesn't remind you of System Shock at all. It's very, very generic compared to what you're used to from System Shock. And I hope that they are going to keep those things at a minimum. Maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea if you want to kind of sprinkle some of that somewhere in the game, as long as it's put in a very, very good spot. But most of the music should be pretty much like the other track that they released, which was really awesome. I really liked the other track. I can't remember what. It was actually a remake of the main menu theme from System Shock 1, and that was really good. I hope they continue with that line.
So, as I was about to say, talking about being lost, how about that Final Fantasy VII Remake?
Well, we don't really know if it's lost, though. I mean, it's supposed to be coming out, so...
It has been missing in action for quite a while. It's been a long time since we heard about that one.
Yeah, well, we have GDC.
That's it. I thought they basically said that it's coming out in 2018, and that's the news we have.
Okay, well, let me rephrase. It's been a long time since we've seen anything from that.
Yeah, in that sense, because that might mean many things. Yeah. Either they are super confident in what they have and they're trying to pull a Bethesda, or they are definitely not confident with what they have and they are trying to pull a Bethesda. Anyway, it can be two things, I guess.
What's the latest word on the what do you call it? Is it the business model of the game? I don't know what to call it these days.
I think it's going to be episodic.
Yeah, it's episodic, and it's going to be like it's going to be a billion episodes based on what we know, because it's only going to be the very beginning of the game, the first episode pretty much, from what I understand.
Like to what stage?
I think it's just like Midgar.
Yeah, but that's the disc 1.
Oh yeah, well that's true actually, yeah. Yeah, like
so that's 1/3 of the game, or even more than 1/3 of the game, because the third disc is only the final boss battle, or the final dungeon. So.
Well, yeah, actually, that's a good point. It's just that, like, modern game wise, like all the world map stuff like that, it's gonna be interesting how they handle that. Because like doing just a single city, that's relatively reasonable, but having to do the entire world, that's gonna be pretty much hard.
I was gonna say that I wonder if they're gonna just drop the open world nature of it and just make the episodes based on each city and that way.
I mean, they could do it, or they could do it. New Deus Ex way, where you kind of have like open areas, but you don't have an open world. And they could combine that with how they did with Final Fantasy X, where you don't have a world map, but you just kind of travel from node to node basically, or you just have like fast travel points, but you don't get to actually walk on the world map. That wouldn't be the worst. I mean, it wouldn't really be Final Fantasy VII, but it wouldn't be the worst.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're gonna do the Deus Ex way and make the first episode and then drop the whole thing.
That's the other Deus Ex way to do things. Yeah.
We never asked for that.
But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what they do with Final Fantasy VII in general, because there's just so many ways it can go wrong, and so many questions.
What I saw from the battle system last time was well, it looked really intense. It looked I was pretty hyped for it, but I might be clouded by the fact that that word choice. But it might just be nostalgia though, because I'm seeing all these beloved characters in a really high definition graphics now. But it's still, I don't know. It looked pretty cool to me.
It's more actiony. Like Final Fantasy as a series is now like it's kind of, you have to accept that, I guess, that it's not gonna be traditional turn-based stuff again.
Yeah.
It's now action stuff more or less. Yeah. Which again is gonna be interesting to see how they do that with Final Fantasy VII with all that iconic stuff in there. I mean, it's gonna be doable, but
if they wanted to go for the old the turn-based, semi-turn-based thing, they could take what happens in Bravely Default, where you can speed up the fights and you can assign macros that your characters are going to do the same things.
I think that's pretty much the modern way. And in general, like I think in all turn-based games now, there are always some abilities. Even back in the day, they had text speed. But now, when you play one of those games in emulator, you have the speed up button, and now games are just incorporating that into the game, like just how to speed up, because nobody feels like waiting.
Yeah.
But of course, that's not very cinematic. So I think it's, in a way, if they want to do the dramatic cinematic Final Fantasy experience, maybe it's better to do action games to deliver that specifically.
I just don't feel like, just looking at the screenshots, having the sort of attack, magic, summon, items, defend menu open all the time, and then trying to have an action game on top of it just seems off to me.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. It might be that they just choose to have it in every screenshot or something, and it's not gonna be like that in the actual game. We'll see that.
But hasn't it been sort of that way in the Final Fantasy 15 as well?
Kinda. Yeah, it's more of a you control one character only, and then you have these combo attacks that you can use your other characters with, and then there's not really that much. You can change your weapon on the fly. You can use some items on the fly. Well, the game pauses for the duration of the selection, but there's no like magic is like it's just one weapon in a sense. There's no going through menus or anything like that during the fights. In that sense, it's just very straightforward action.
Yeah, quite streamlined.
Yeah, and I wouldn't personally mind at all if the Final Fantasy VII Remake goes to that direction. Just of course, the characters in 15 they're much more like side characters than Barret or Tifa, for example.
Yeah, I really think they would have to do some sort of like, you can swap between the characters. Like that could work, where it's like Final Fantasy 15, but you can swap between characters and then the AI picks up the rest of the characters, for example.
I think like that's what happened in the gameplay video that we saw. I
sort of assumed they would do that.
Now I found an article which has like some screenshots from an Ghost Doors event, and it says that it looks like it would have this sort of Kingdom Hearts style strategic system and not that much of an action system.
Yeah, a bunch of people have been saying that it's gonna be like Kingdom Hearts. Like that's the rumor. So. And of course, Final Fantasy XV's system wasn't that popular with the fans. So, and Kingdom Hearts is very popular. So they might feel even stronger about going to that direction now.
But I guess we have to see.
Yeah, we'll see. One day.
It's going to be a pretty huge release. I mean, I can't imagine the buzz that's going to be happening when it's going to be released. I mean, this is exactly what we were dreaming of when we were back in the day playing the original. You were, well, you know what, you talk at recess with your friends, like, imagine if we had this awesome Final Fantasy VII, like, new version, like, with, like, you could see the characters, like, in really detailed and everything. And, well, this is it. So it's going to be...
Or is it,
looking,
you know,
looking at this more photorealistic Cloud having that huge sword just looks silly.
Yep.
But yeah, we've seen the visual style already in the movies, so we're used to it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, it's not that because there's all the movies and stuff like that. So actually, it's not gonna be. There's gonna be a bunch of people who are gonna be like, "What the fuck is this anime bullshit?" or whatever. But you know, people who are familiar with the original game and are not familiar with all the movies and everything that came after it. But it's not really unprecedented. They have quite established how things are gonna look now.
I just saw some screenshot from a trailer apparently, and somebody spotted Auron from Final Fantasy X. His silhouette. He's standing in the back, like he's basically just a bystander in shadows. But if you pause this frame, you can actually see it. Let me actually link it to
maybe
to
it's
us.
Vincent.
Yeah, Vincent looks a bit similar. Yeah.
It's just Escape.
Yeah, but Vincent has spiky hair, doesn't he?
No, not really.
I mean, it could just be an Easter egg. That is quite Auron itself, but it's probably just an Easter egg.
Yeah.
There.
Vincent Valentine. Yeah, he has this kind of it's spiky, yeah. Not in a main character way maybe, but still.
Okay, yeah, that's Auron. It's the you can see it from the like shoulders or the whatever it's called. It comes like in front of his face.
Yeah.
That's Auron. Or a
And I
similar
guess
character.
since that's just a trailer, so I guess that they could have just hit an Easter egg there.
Yeah, I think
Shits
it's
and
gonna
giggles.
be an Easter egg.
I doubt a lot of what we've seen from the game this far is gonna be in the actual game when it releases at some point, because I sort of feel it's been not necessarily bullshitting, but because it's been such a long time that.
I mean, some of the
What should-
cutscene material, they might. I mean, it would be weird if they don't use it unless they do like massive style changes, because pre-rendered stuff, you know, it's not like that technology is advancing or anything. Like if it's usable, it's usable, unless they have some direction changes. But gameplay, of course, who knows? It's gonna be really interesting. In general, it's a very interesting. I mean, I think we even discussed this before in our materials how interesting of an undertaking this whole thing is, because of how different Final Fantasy VII fundamentally is from how games are made now, content-wise, like the amount of content and everything. And
the amount of hype behind it, even though people
well, that
haven't
too.
even really seen it.
that
But
too.
it's Final Fantasy VII, so it has to be incredible.
And the amount, like, if you had to voice act all the dialogue and how, like, I mean, imagine doing exactly Final Fantasy VII just with modern graphics and voice acting and stuff like that, and imagine the amount of work.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you have so many enemies that are just palette swaps or whatever, so people would bitch about that, so you would have to design every one of those separately. All the environments now in full 3D, so you can view them from whatever angle, you can zoom up, stuff like that. It's insane.
So they probably started doing this remake right after they finished the actual game. So
Yeah.
it just has been taking this long.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll see.
Do,
We'll
do,
see.
do you
That's
guys
basically-
do you consider the remakes, or rather, I'll phrase it this way: Steam has versions of, for example, Final Fantasy IX, do you consider those to be remasters or just ports?
They are ports.
I mean, they are PC ports of a mobile game.
Yeah.
So-
I mean,
They're
but
from
the
the mo-
mobile
from a
game
mobile
itself,
version.
you could argue, is a remake.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, that's the thing. Like, how much new is there? Is it terminology is
Yeah.
difficult because if technically if you added something there, it's a new version. And even changing it visually, it's a new version. But then again,
Yeah.
ports are made all the time, and we don't call ports new versions. So we don't call the whatever, I don't know, like you don't call Call of Duty on Xbox and on PlayStation 4. You don't call them different versions or different games. They're the same game, even if there are some differences.
I'm really sad actually that talking about Final Fantasy IX and the new version of it. I'm really sad about that game because the character models look actually pretty good, but the backgrounds, the designs are amazing like they were back in the day, but the resolution is so low that the characters stand out way too much.
Yeah,
in
'cause
this
they
one.
lost
And
the-
I guess
Yeah.
the reason is that they lost the actual
Originals.
original.
So back in the
And that
day,
makes me really sad.
I assume back in the day they took like comparatively massive amount of space, and at some point they were like, well, we're done with this game. Let's delete the originals or whatever.
We're
done.
done with this game.
Yeah. And it would be an insane amount of work for Reboot to completely remake those. So
Yeah.
it's
All right. We've been talking about 30 minutes, and we haven't mentioned Dark Souls yet. So
Oh god,
there
damn
it is.
You took it from my mouth.
he just had to do it, yeah. And they don't really have. But speaking of remakes, actually, they're talking about the Dark Souls 1 remake, right? That was-
Yeah, it's coming out on Switch and the consoles.
Not that I care, but I just wanted to
And
get it
PC.
out there.
Yeah, and it is officially called Remastered. So
Okay.
now we have something to go on.
Whatever.
I mean, I think it's in a way pretty obvious that it's a remaster and not a remake, because I guess it's still on the same engine, uses same assets. It's just for the new machines.
But it's still gonna be interesting because there's like very big nuance differences between, for example, the 3 Dark Souls games. Like they all have different mechanics, they're balanced different and stuff like that. So what version are they gonna use? Do they feel like what they did with 3, for example, that's the strongest way to do things? Are they gonna apply those mechanics to the first one now? What are they gonna do? It's gonna be interesting to see.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I still hope that they stick with what how things were done in Dark Souls 1, because that's well, it's the game. it's basically the same game, but on the other hand, I do understand that when the series has advanced, they have probably learned something about how to balance things, and that's part of the reason why Dark Souls 2 and 3 turned out the way they were. But I would like to just see all the handy improvements to the UI in Dark Souls 3. Take all of those and put them into the same game balance as in Dark Souls 1, and then you should have a pretty good package.
I think that would be the optimal way to do it, because like in a way, if people want Dark Souls 3, they can go play Dark Souls 3, for example. So if it's a remaster, you should, even if there are flaws, you should stick to those flaws. Like a good example of a recent, very faithful remake is of course, or remaster, is the StarCraft Brood War remaster, which is essentially like it's 1-to-1. They released a small balance patch, which also came for the original version of the game, and they made the original version of the game free, and they added some features, and then basically you can pay them money to get upgraded graphics. But it's basically gameplay-wise, almost everything is the same. I think some pathfinding derpiness, some of it they fixed, but a lot of the bugs and such are there still. A lot of the weird, is this a feature or not, tricks that the
They
Koreans
are
use.
features.
Yeah, they are features.
It's been
They
so
are,
long.
Yeah, and like the metagame of that has evolved around all those. Which you could argue with Dark Souls 1 too, for example. Like, there's a lot of stuff where you could be like, oh, that's bad or that's good or whatever, but or like that's not intended. But it's that game has such a cult following, and people are speedrunning and stuff like that. People are used to the mechanics. So, it's gonna be, people have figured out ways for it to work, and it seems to be balanced PvE experience if you know what you're doing. So why change it?
Yeah, and it also comes down to matters of taste.
Yeah, of course.
Now, for example, well, I can't find such a good example from Dark Souls in itself, but in Demon Souls, the faith-based weapons are pretty overpowered. They regenerate your health while you are holding them, and they also do lots of damage. So they are, in my opinion, they are pretty much the best weapons you can choose in that game. But I still wouldn't like, if we got a remaster of Demon Souls, maybe please one day. I still wouldn't want them to change this, because it's actually something that somewhat of a teaching, in my opinion, because if you don't want to use those weapons because they're overpowered, then it's your choice. You can take something else and use that instead. You can find your own way. You don't have to use the overpowered weapons, but by allowing them to be as strong as they are, it gives them a lot of character, and it tells something about the game world. It tells a little bit of a story. At least in my opinion, it says that since they are like holy and they are faith-based, it tells something like, well, this is just my conjecture, but you could imagine that the god or whatever entity watches over the heroes is somewhat present in there somehow, because those weapons are so strong, or
And in general,
stuff like this.
And in general, like if it's PvE focused, and in PvE, as you said, like you get to, it's up to you what to do. Like you don't have to use the overpowered options. I think that's completely fine. We're talking about similar things to this previously when we talked about hand-holding stuff like that, where like the hand-holding way would be to remove those, maybe, because they're OP.
Exactly.
Like whatever, people can make decisions, their own decisions, whether they want that or not.
Mm-hmm.
That is true.
If we're done with the Souls games, I would like to ask
We're
Matias.
never done with them.
I would like to ask Matias what he thought of the Metal Gear Solid remake announcement a while back.
What remake announcement a while back?
The one that had the extra name Pachinko on it.
Oh man.
But
say
anyway.
say it isn't so.
But anyway, Metal Gear has had its HD collections, two of them, I guess, the HD collection and the Legacy collection. And funnily, the series itself has a remake in its actual games. Like Metal Gear Solid 1 is a remake of Metal Gear.
Yeah.
So it's canonical remake, I guess.
I mean, no, it's just weird. A remake.
But it's
that's
still
how remakes work.
Yeah, no, but it's still the first game is still part of the lore.
Oh.
The cool. Remake happens after the actual first game.
Okay. In that sense, yeah.
I mean, yeah. It's a remake. I think Kojima said that he wanted to make the original game in 3D, and it became Metal Gear Solid. But it is basically the same game. Like if you think about all the set pieces and the story and everything, it's basically the same game with just different characters.
I didn't know that.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's pretty nice.
And also, did you mean the Snake Eater Pachinko?
Yeah.
Now I remember that. Now that you mentioned, I googled it, and yeah, I've seen some pictures of this. But no wonder I forgot it, because I mercifully forget all these trespasses.
Oh hey, how about Metal Gear Survive?
Yeah, I was just about to ask the same thing.
Never happened.
I mean, it launched just now.
No, you must be mistaken.
I saw a savage tweet from the Gus Hirai fake Twitter account with something like, I don't understand why people are complaining that Metal Gear Survive is not a stealth game. I mean, it came out without anybody noticing. And then there was a second part, which was something like, I mean, yeah, that joke was really bad, but, then again it fits, or very, very lame, but it fits with. There it is. Yes, I know the joke is lazy and unoriginal, which is why it's the perfect joke to make about Metal Gear Survive. Double burn.
Oh god. But I mean, just looking at this Pachinko Snake Eater, the graphics of the cutscenes that are from Snake Eater just look so amazing that it just feels extra bad that this never became an actual game.
What is it with pachinko machines? I mean, this
Money.
should have been a really of course.
Yeah, money, and especially because it's locally sourced organic money. No, but it's it's Japanese money for Japanese people, because Japanese companies often are very, how I would say, introverted. They like their own local market, and they very much like selling 200,000 copies in Japan for them might be more important than selling 2 million copies abroad. Stuff like that, or that's what it seems like anyway. So I think it's just that they were like, well, we can get this local money from the pachinko things. That shit is popular here. There's a lot of money into it, or whatever. We don't really care about the Western markets or anything like that. We have a good thing going on here, so let's just do this.
Then there's also Twin Snakes, Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, which is that's an interesting one, since they also change the dialogue here and there. They don't change facts; they just change the lines, how they're said, and it's that's a kind of a remake, I guess. I don't know. I would call it a remake.
I think it's a remake because it's a different engine. It has extra content. They actually changed the director. It's not Kojima directed. It was directed by some other dude who really loved Animatrix. So there's a lot of slowdowns and bullet dodging and all sorts of stuff in the cutscenes.
Oh, that's right. I remember some of that.
And a fun fact is that they actually had to re-record all the voice lines because the old ones from the first game were recorded in a sort of a shack.
Oh.
And because the PlayStation 1 had such a low quality audio, all the background noise you can't hear it. But if it was put on a GameCube, you could hear all the background noises like cars driving by and all sorts of stuff. So they had to re-record it.
Amazing. So now we know what to do when we start recording.
Yes, go to the local highway and record it there.
And only release on the PlayStation 1. And then something
Special release, only on PS1.
That would be a nightmare. Imagine trying to get a Unity game, like modern Unity game, to run on fucking PlayStation 1.
I would so like to see that, because you could then have the weird morphing PS1 walls in games. That weird shifting morphing. I don't know. I once actually read somewhere like somebody gave a really, really deep explanation of why that happens, and it seems like people knew what they were like talking about, but I didn't understand any of it. I just know when I see it.
Yeah, they have PlayStation 1 had its own quirks, and the Nintendo 64 of course had its own quirks, and all attempts at 3D before that of course also had their own quirks. I think the next console generation was the time when they kind of really figured stuff out, so there wasn't really like you could quite like principles were uniform across the scale, so to speak. Like something on the PS2 and something on the Xbox are roughly gonna work similarly compared to how it was like like one thing people always say is on the Nintendo 64 everything is balls, and then on the PlayStation 1 everything is like polygons, and that was one big difference.
So anything else to say about Remakes?
I mean, there's a bunch of stuff we could talk about still, but like, I haven't even mentioned all the remakes I played, which isn't that many, but I really like the DuckTales remake. It's a good game, so that's the shout out I wanna have. The DuckTales remake is quite fun, and I think that's by Way Forward. I think all the Way Forward stuff is quite fun and cool. So the music is good.
Yeah, that is amazing. I listened to the soundtrack. It's really good.
How about the Skyrim remake?
It's completely new game. Yeah.
But they changed something that I really appreciate. The sun shadows. they don't like click into position, like they just snap once a minute or how often.
Yeah, the sun actually moves organically now. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it looks.
I mean, yeah, they did
so
update
much
the
better.
engine. It's just using the Fallout 4 version of their own. Well, it's their own engine. And now it works on 64-bit systems and stuff like that.
I think you could do that in the original Skyrim with a console command to have the sun sort of tick in a much more smoother way.
Well, yeah, probably, but it would have performance issues or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it had.
I tried it, but I couldn't get it to work.
I would assume what
Quite
they
as
did
well.
is they baked like a ton of just light maps, basically, or something like that. Or something was baked anyway, that's why it's clicking. That's the only way why it makes any sense that they had to do it that way. But who knows how that engine works, like, Bethesda maybe.
Here we go again.
Yeah, but there has to be some. That's the other thing. There's two things we have to do. We have to talk about Souls games, and we have to shit on Bethesda. Those are mandated.
Yeah, but it's in the end, we just love Bethesda so much that.
I mean, that is really the
we
thing.
can
Like, I
criticize
want someday to have fans of my games or our games who treat them the same way, where like, because it's this sort of it's ribbing, as you do between two friends, for example, like that you're kind of like giving each other shit in a joking manner, but you still care. And it's a little bit like that, because I mean I put like hundreds of hours into a lot of Bethesda games. I love them, but there's also so much that I don't love, or maybe I love to hate. There's a lot I love to hate. Maybe that's a good way to put it.
You know, it's just love. You play the game and you accept it for what it is. But one day we really have to make we have to make a supercut of all our Dark Souls mentions and Bethesda shits.
Yeah.
And I'm still saying that, or maybe I haven't actually maybe mentioned it in a devlog, but we should do a Dark Souls jar, where whenever you come for some Dark Souls, you have to put a coin in there, and then when it hits like 60 euros, we buy Dark Souls for one of the office consoles and force me to play through it.
Yeah.
I mean, I already have it on PC, so but it's not the same. The money has to go somewhere.
I think you really should play the original before the remaster comes.
Yeah, probably.
So
I've been thinking that I should probably, because it's kind of like feels like a jarring task at this point. There's all of them. There's Demon's Souls, then there's the three Dark Souls, and then there's Bloodborne. Annoyingly enough, like I would like to either start from the very beginning, or I would like to do Bloodborne, and those are the two options I cannot do on the PC. So, well, I guess you could do Demon's Souls on an emulator, maybe even Bloodborne, but it's not the same. But I've been thinking lately that I should probably do Dark Souls 1. That's the one that seems most kind of like interesting to me, because it's sort of like it started the massive success story and stuff like that.
Yeah, if you are interested in it from like a game developer perspective, then I would say, and you're only going to play Dark Souls. So that's
what I've been thinking. So I have both 1 and 2 actually on Steam. But
yeah,
talking about Dark Souls 3 is actually in the Humble Monthly. So if you want Dark Souls 3 and the Ashes of what was it? Ariandel. It's $12, and you will get something extra as well, like 4 or 5 more games.
I could get more stuff to my Humble Bundle folder.
Yeah, but imagine then you have all Dark Souls.
Yeah, that's true. I started adding all these Steam folders. My Steam folders are now, I have disappointments, then I have Humble Bundles, I never asked for this, old and pointless, and then what is this?
Nice.
And some games are in several folders.
Yeah, and then there's the VR.
Yeah, there's the VR you cannot get rid of, unless you remove all the games that's Valve's official stance. To remove that, you just have to hide those games from your library, and then it goes away. I have Serious Sam Fusion 2017 beta and Subnautica in there.
Oh man.
No goddamn idea what the fuck is Serious Sam Fusion 2017 beta or why I have it. It's also in I never asked for this and what is this folders, by the way. But it's there now. But yeah, I think we are diverging into
a little bit
in the different topics.
As it tends to happen.
As it tends to happen near the end. So maybe we could try.
Yeah.
Try to wrap
but
this up.
it's just a sign of being very good at improvising.
Yeah. Yes. That's.
But all in
one way to
all,
put it.
thank you very much for this chat. It's always fun to talk with you guys, and especially about remakes that everybody has some pretty pretty intense opinions on. So that's our episode this time. See you next time.
Yeah.
So long.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.